and welcome back to the Wednesday Club.
The Wednesday Club.
That was the Choir of Angels.
Thank you.
That is
Thank
currently...
And on our today's topic, it was a choir of demons.
Well, I was going to say we're welcoming a certain artist, but now I'm not going to because that's sad.
Did I ruined everything?
Well, actually, mine was kind of dark, so let's go with yours instead. Rewind that. Today,
that was a choir of demons.
We have a choir of demons celebrating all of the spooky side of comics in honor of one particular individual who you may have guessed from this incredible backdrop by Ken Wynn.
Let's
take a moment.
I'm gonna go that way. There we are.
That is our very favorite muck-encrusted mockery of a man.
Ooh!
The Swamp Thing.
Some nice alliteration.
Co-created by legendary writer Len Wein and brilliant artist Bernie Wrightson, who, as many of you may have known, passed away after a long illness this weekend. But before that happened, he had quite the amazing career in comics and fine art. So we're going to talk about that and get into our spooky horror favorites. This episode, brilliantly titled by Taliesin,
thank you.
is called Vault of Horror. Because we will look inside for all of the spookiness to be contained in comics. I would say that next to superheroes, horror is probably the best represented, creative genre of American comics. Would you say?
It weirdly, I'll also say that even Japan does some really good horror comics.
I only exclude Japan because Japan has tons and tons of flowering genres.
Sure.
Whereas, we only have a couple that we've really gone deep with.
And I feel like one of the reasons, we've talked briefly before about the comic code that came down and squashed all creativity briefly, but the horror comics were a big
by
reason.
Briefly, he means from 1954 to the 80s when people started publishing
Like
things
that.
about it.
But the horror comics were a big reason why a lot of that went down, because they were dark. They were really dark. There was dark. So it was
the 40s and especially 50s horror comics, especially those under the EC banner, one of which was Vault of Horror, and another of which you may have heard of was called Tales from the Crypt.
Tales from the Crypt.
They were anthology titles where people were sort of pushing the envelope of the weird and mysterious, back when weird meant creepy.
Very creepy.
Yeah, sorry. There's no synonym for scary that you can use that isn't an actual comic book title, so just assume everything is a reference today.
So,
yeah.
I have an actual question. How did the comic book code affect horror comics?
It destroyed them.
Yeah.
Because, because you had, Tales of Suspense. I'm going from what I know of Marvel. You had Tales of Suspense. You had
Tales to Astonish.
Tales to Astonish. You had, all of those. That they were working. You had Orgo the monster,
well,
that Jack Kirby, all that
the
stuff.
The monsters suddenly become more about it's a strange rock creature, and much less about and it drinks the blood of the living.
Yeah.
There were very specific restrictions on
On the
reason
comics
the
code.
zombie that walks like a man is a zombie that walks like a man. I believe, Simon Garth, they had to design him very specifically so that he was acceptable to the comics code. I think he had to actually be a living guy because they were specifically prohibited from having zombies or something.
That was on the list.
Showing
the dead was a big thing. Was on the list of things you could not do.
So this came down in 1954. Comic books voluntarily adopted the comics code in order to keep their entire industry from being shut down because they were being dragged in front of the Senate for making kids degenerate, like you do with your pictures. And so there was a long list of things that they could no longer do because certainly there were some creative excesses in those EC days. We're gonna do a comics code episode.
Oh yeah, but those it led to some amazing horror comics. I mean, there's stuff that was to be fair, sexually exploitive.
It was intended
vicious.
to shut down a lot of crime stories, a lot of horror stories. Those were the sort of primary genres targeted by this ban. And one thing that you do get, in terms of its effect on horror comics, was that what you could publish as comics got to be constrained in terms of darkness and subject matter. And the things that were no longer appropriate to publish as comics did actually find another flowering when we got into the 70s. Speaking of Bernie Wrightson, he was an artist influenced by those early ECs, he often cited, and then who eventually went on to work in I found a loophole in the comics code. These aren't comics, they're magazines. So Wrightson would go on to work on Creepy Magazine and Eerie. I think more creepy than Eerie. but
More creepy than eerie. That's
those
a
are
phrase
two different titles.
you're gonna hear today.
Once again, they're all titles. They were anthology magazines published by Warren Publishing, who you're going to get back to.
I will.
But they provided an outlet for a lot of, like, Wrightson put a lot of work in there. Richard Corbin put a lot of work in there. They were both strong influences on later creators, such as, for example, a little guy called Guillermo del Toro.
Well, he's done some stuff, hasn't
Yeah,
he?
Luke,
that
he
guy?
likes monsters, okay?
I don't know that I've ever heard of that guy.
Yeah, no.
Huh.
I
He sounds like an interesting fellow.
feel like I saw a video of him making quesadillas or something once, and like that was like a thing.
Can I
Is that
tell
a real
you?
thing?
That is actually
Excuse
he
me, I
puts,
had to go Google this.
I think is he the director who puts a recipe on every DVD?
What?
Sounds like he could
Wait,
be.
who was it? I may have totally messed this up. There's some director that it's been years who was
Chat, help me.
who does a cooking show on every DVD of every movie he puts out randomly.
That's amazing.
That's been like a decade. It'll come to me.
So-
the chat room will answer this question. It probably isn't Del Toro. Now I'm thinking about it.
Can I tell you a quick?
This is how bad I am today.
Can I tell you a quick Del Toro story? That
Absolutely.
Actually, Brittany, my wife, my lovely wife, who might be watching. Hello, my lovely wife, Brittany. She got tickets to go see Pacific Rim, like one of those like audience screenings of Pacific Rim, where like the filmmakers are there and everything else, and like we answer questions and say like, here's what we liked, here's what we didn't like, all that stuff. Happens in Los Angeles a lot. So she got tickets to that, and we went to go see that. This is like a month before it comes out. We're excited for it. I walk into the AMC in Burbank, and Guillermo del Toro is with his family at the concession stand. No one is talking to him. No one is around. People are walking by him like, la, 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 I'm going to see a movie. And I'm just like, Del Toro, he's right there. And I was like, he's with his family. I'm not going to bother the man, but this is awesome that he's right there. And if he wasn't with his family, I would go just say thank you, for Hellboy and like all the Pan's Labyrinth. Like those are also great movies,
It's not Del Toro. Now it's killing me. Okay.
Yeah. What's that?
It's not Del Toro who does the rest
Now
of
you
Now
can't-
it's killing
yeah,
me.
yeah.
It's good. It's like I'm like having back on
So
Kronos.
as I'm thinking that, his family leaves. And he literally just like leans up against the concession stand and starts drinking a soda. And I'm just like,
Got a thought bubble in his head like, so bored, wish someone would talk to me.
I was like, well, this is a sign from Jesus. Like, I should go talk to Del Toro now. And like Brittany had already gone in to get our seats, and we were there with a couple other friends. So I go over to him, I'm like, excuse me, Guillermo del Toro, Mr. Del Toro? And he goes, hello, yes. I was like, oh my God, I'm a giant fan of your movies. Like, I'm really excited to see your upcoming film. Like, we're here for the screening. He goes, oh, I'm excited for you to see this. I'm very excited for this film. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I'm so excited. And he goes, so what is it that you do? And I go, well, I'm trying to be a screenwriter, and he goes, yes, everyone is trying to be the screenwriter. And like, we laughed about it, and he goes, it is a son of a bitch, huh? And I was like, it's pretty tough. It's really tough. And he goes, you spend so many hours, so many days and years writing these scripts, draft after draft, perfecting it and getting it there. And you turn it into your agent and you find out, there's 100 other movies that are already being made just like it, and your work is all to nothing. I was like, that's coming from you. I'm screwed. I'm so screwed. But like, it was like he meant it like, he didn't mean it as like a mean thing or an insult or anything like that. Like,
No,
good luck, kid. It was just like two
you got
professionals.
solidarity from Del Toro.
And it was just like, we're just
That's the right. That's
Trading
the
war
writer's.
stories.
It's the writer fist bump. It's
Yeah,
the writer fist
yeah.
bump. Like,
So,
Son of a bitch.
Son of a bitch.
He goes, there's a son of a bitch. So then, I don't know why I'm doing that terrible accent.
I know. Well, it's
But-
He's got a
But-
really cute accent.
It
He
does.
So as we were leaving, now everyone's around him. Like, he's got a giant crowd around him. And I'm like, hey, there he is. That's really cool. I got to talk to that guy earlier. And as we're passing by, he reaches up his arm and splits the entire huddle around him and goes, my friend Matthew, come here, talk to me about my movie. And I was like, huh? And like, he'd like autograph stuff for us. And he wanted my opinions. He's like, you're a writer, what did you think? And I was like, I was like, I loved it. It was great. Like, I had a lot of fun action. I didn't want to like tell him like, problematic here and there, like, I was just like freaking out.
I'm not even going to go into Pacific Rim. I love Pacific Rim.
Yeah, I love Pacific Rim.
I'm hateful.
But like, I basically was like, just told him what I loved about it, what sequences worked. And he was like, I was really trying to do a Western. Did that come across? I was like, absolutely. He's like, I'm glad that this came across to you, Matthew. And I was like, you're my new favorite person.
He is, by all accounts, a giant sweetheart. And
Yeah.
I'm assuming every shop in Los
autograph
Angeles
stuff
does
for
have
us,
these
and he
stories,
will-
because he buys
they all
everything.
do.
But like, yeah, he's a longtime friend of House of Secrets with incredible good taste.
Everybody in movies reads comics now.
Well, some of them start like he's one of those guys. Like he was reading those horror magazines.
Yeah.
He was
Oh, yeah.
reading those
It comes out.
anthologies. He was reading like he grew up on this stuff.
I have a Swamp Thing question for you that you
Okay.
might be able to answer. So
We haven't even gotten to.
I know.
This is the thing that I love Wrightson for is that like much as we bashed on them not being able to do horror stuff in regular comics, they found some brilliant ways to do it. And
So
do you want to ask the question first or get into it first?
I first want to ask a question that we got from our chat.
sure.
Yep.
Scorpens asked, what would you recommend for Japanese horror comics? We had mentioned that
We
earlier.
had no fewer than 3 different Twitter recs for Junji Ito as soon as we asked what people's favorite horror was.
Yeah?
If you want to go old school, Rumiko Takahashi, who wrote Inuyasha and Ranma 1/2 and Urusei Yatsura, also did several short-form horror anthology books, including Fire Tripper, which is hard to... They're single
not
issues.
read these, and this is amazing, 'cause she's my
Mermaid
fave.
Scar, Mermaid Forest, fire horror stories that are terrifying, really good, and really scary and really sad. And I highly recommend if you can find any of... it's called the Rumic World series. It was published by Viz in 300 BC.
Yeah, 1990.
They're actually on
BC.
stone tablets.
Yeah.
You have to download, actually, you have to get the granite to download. It's really frustrating.
But the Junji Ito's works are now more widely available in English than they used to be. Uzumaki is the title most people recommend first. I've only read a couple pages of it, and they were already terrifying.
Parasite for body horror, if you're into body horror.
Jody Hauser is on our chat.
Hey, Jody!
She suggested Attack on Titan.
Yeah?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
I have not read the manga, but I've watched the anime. Is it anime or anime?
It's Uname.
Uname?
Don't stop trolling him.
Sorry.
Wait, Taliesin troll me?
He doesn't
You're
know.
saying it in
I've been
Japanese,
this is going on for
anime?
years. He doesn't know. Abort.
It's anime. It's anime, right? Anime? It's
animation.
Anime.
Sorry.
Technically, it'd be anime, but
Anime,
we
yeah.
don't say samurai, so it's okay to
Anime.
just say anime.
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 Yeah. I've
The
seen
American.
anime and I loved it. And our Mercer is in that.
Yeah, our
It's fun.
friend of the show, Matt Mercer,
Friend of the show, Matt Mercer.
and vague friend of the show, Lauren Landa, who's friend of the show, but not friend of the show. She's mostly
Are we in a
irritated
fight
we
with
can't
her?
have.
No.
She's
Are
irritated
we
that we can't.
frenemy of the show?
She's like, "Are you available for breakfast?" I'm like, "No, I'm doing Wednesday Club." She's like, "Son of a bitch!" So she's not a fan of
Oh,
the show.
so it is to be war between us.
Yes,
She's
Lauren?
She's a wonderful lady.
she is a
I
wonderful
like
lady.
her. I like her.
But
I'm
my,
only being so blasé because I haven't met her yet. I'd probably freak out.
my question on Swamp Thing, though, just in this direction, is like
Yeah.
the original. So like the old school horror books before, back in the day, were anthologies, but they had like hosts, like Cain and Abel.
Yes. Okay. So.
Hold on. I have to point out that Jody Hauser suggested Attack on Titan because she wrote the free comic book day issue. She is biased and also a big fan.
Done. Yeah, we're in.
Good work, Jody.
It's pretty exciting. They're doing like new anthology type and Attack on Titan stories, and Jodie's writing one of them, and she's fun. Okay, so I'm also highly biased because I love Jodie.
Cain and Abel.
I still have not met this Jody. I don't
Oh!
believe it. I
We'll
can't wait
fix
to meet, I hope I get to meet you, Jody. I've heard nothing but wonderful things about you. May I throw, before you get into
Yep.
this, my wife would kill me if I did not throw out as a possible horror title. I don't know if you would consider it horror or not, but her favorite manga or manga.
I say manga usually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Manga.
Her favorite manga is Berserk.
Oh yeah,
Ah.
good one.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she full on legit loves Berserk. Like
Good. It's good stuff.
so, I've read a couple of them. They are intense. They are amazing, and I haven't even gotten to the good stuff. And it's just like
The truth is that
whoa.
horror manga deserve an episode of their own.
read that years
like,
ago.
It is a
We'll do one.
deep.
We'll do one.
Category catalog.
Yeah, and
There we go.
we'll pull in some serious people for that. We have serious people.
We'll just freak ourselves out. We're all good.
Cain and Abel.
But in the
Sorry,
meantime,
Cain and
so
Abel.
a
Cain and
lot
Abel.
of these old school horror books, we've talked before about how a lot of old school comics were anthology titles. You didn't necessarily want to take a chance on everything right off. You would have like a rotating spotlight, and then if things took off, you could greenlight their own stuff. And so as a way to tie together, some of those would have hosts. You might be familiar with a certain Crypt Keeper, who of course comes from the Tales from the Crypt comics. And then in the, so pre-code is this like 50s and earlier stuff. But after that, the sort of second flowering of horror stuff, roughly contemporary with, but maybe a little before the magazines came around.
60s, 70s.
You have anthology titles like House of Mystery
And House of Secrets.
and House of Secrets. A name which, by incredible coincidence...
Yeah, no, that's weird.
Yeah, certain comic book store... I don't know.
No idea.
Who knew?
Those were two houses, two different houses. One had Cain and one had Abel, and they were like these pseudo-biblical where they would just like Cain would murder Abel randomly, and that would be kind of the fun. It was like kind of a Punch and Judy vibe. And
they would host and introduce the stories in their relative anthologies.
Yeah, and they had like a library. And if anyone's seen Dark Place, it kind of like Dark Place's host kind of gets a vibe of Abel.
What?
Like
Garth
in the
Marenghi's
vaults,
Dark
Garth
Place?
Marenghi's kind of
yes,
angle
yes.
is kind of Abel in my mind because he's like, I've got all of my stories in my vaults downstairs. Please let your fabulous take you down. And yeah, it's my like the comedy version of Abel. So
funny story, my backwards comic book development. I thought Neil Gaiman made those guys up for years.
I did too.
Because I read Sandman before I read our social media guy, Chris Lockey, who is fantastic and a huge comic book fan, is horrified right now. But what was so cool
I was
was
legitimately
finding
just
out.
thinking that. I was just like, wait, is this the same Cain?
It's
I mean,
the
I
same
didn't
Cain
think
and
he made
Abel
up
from
Cain
Sandman.
and Abel. I was clear on the pre-existence of the biblical characters, for the record.
But no, that was I was delighted when I found out that like those were real places and real people in the comic verse.
What I love about comics is that we accidentally say things like, I was delighted when I found out those were real people. And what we mean is that people wrote comics about them for 20 years before the comics we're thinking of.
Yes.
I'm making fun of you, but I'm also
I feel
completely
it.
serious
I
right now
feel the love.
because this is what I love about comics. The internally created realities which can stretch between different writers and artists and different decades and different takes on things, and these like they can be cumbersome. I know continuity is a problem and it doesn't actually affect these horror guys that much.
No.
But the beauty of it is when you get moments like that where you're like, that's real.
Well, and then the weird thing about Swamp
I don't
Thing
think
with
we
all
actually
this.
filled in the gaps, though.
No.
Neil Gaiman used them in Sandman. I'm so sorry.
Sorry, yes.
This is your weekly
They
reference to Sandman. It will happen again. It will happen every week forever.
Every week we'll be
and
talking
also
about
was
Sandman.
probably the biggest influence, like the first real horror I read.
Oh yeah, it was one of the first I read as well.
In fact, it was so scary I put it down for like 7 years.
God, there was some
I
good.
tried to read it
the
when I was
serial,
15 and I was not ready.
the
It was the serial killer
convention.
convention.
The serial convention
I got
was too
through
much.
the diner. And I got to the serial
the
convention,
diner.
and it
Oh.
wasn't even that I didn't want to read them. It was that I was like 15, and I was reading these books, and I was like, I'm enjoying this, and that makes me feel weird.
Oh, the diner is the worst
I can
Purple
tell
Man
it's
story ever.
Yeah. There's some stuff I wasn't ready for, and then I came back to it, and it's my favorite book. So yeah, it's okay to wait.
But my question on Swamp Thing, since we're going there, no, this is all. I knew this was supposed to be a really long question. This is the first time Swamp Thing, and like Swamp Thing was like a weird pop culture phenomenon. Like they made movies and stuff out of Swamp Thing that no one remembers. Swamp Thing was the first time I can think of like a horror anthology book that has a central character where it's not a host.
I never made the connection to it
Like-
being an anthology book. It's just that he happens to travel to different genres.
It's like
and
Highway
meet
to
different
Heaven.
people.
It's the same way that Highway to Heaven or like Sliders is kind of an anthology show.
Uh-huh.
It's a centralized character horror anthology of like we're no longer hosting the horror, we're just walking into it every
You know,
week.
it's probably a really good transitional document that way from the sort of like fully serialized horror stories that would come later and coming literally out of the anthologies because, of course, the first appearance of Swamp Thing, we're finally getting there.
Yes.
Was written by
Very
Lemmy
roundabout.
and drawn by Bernie Wrightson in a special book called House of Secrets 92. We're really obsessed with Swamp Thing at my shop, and again, giant coincidence.
Giant coincidence.
Giant coincidence.
Well, so much good has come out of Swamp Thing.
Yes. So it was originally a short story in House of Secrets. There are some really adorable. Full disclosure, I made 2 long videos all about Swamp Thing for Geek and Sturdy Vlogs 3.5 years ago.
Bless you.
And it's sort of weird and embarrassing to look back at, but I still love everything in them. And a lot of it is, there's a lot of behind the scenes about the creation of Swamp Thing. Because Len Wein was just sort of like talking to his editor at a party, and he was just like spitballing, and he was like, "What do you got for me?" And he was just like, "And for the love of God, I have no idea where the idea came from."
Thing.
And it was funny because the name came about because he had this germ of an idea for like a murdered scientist, and then sort of who was sort of We'll get to that.
I was going to say character. We at some point we should do the character elevator pitch, like of just like so that people who haven't read Swamp Thing can at least have like an image in their head.
Okay. Well, in the process of working on it, Len Wein kept calling it That Swamp Thing I'm working on. And that's literally how they got to the name. Those two had been collaborating on a number of horror shorts, and this one, In House of Secrets 92, proved so popular that editor Joe Orlando was like, you got to do it. This is our best-selling book of however much. He's going to get his own title. And they were like, no, I don't know. And they came up with a new pitch for their tale of tragedy and lost love. And that was the original 1972 version of Swamp Thing. So. And here's the deal, because do you want, like...
I'm learning so much.
Well,
I love my show! I love our show! So I'm learning so much. This is the best.
The original short story, they reworked his origin when they decided to give him his own book. And then...
They Hawkman'd him
more
hard.
than 10 years later, that origin would be rewritten again by a little guy named Alan Moore.
Is he little, though?
He's very little. His beard, on the other hand, is immense.
Oh, okay. His beard is what gives him his size.
Yeah. His power comes from his beard.
He's not little at all. I'm just using the word little a lot today.
He's got a great voice.
But for the record,
Alan Moore.
I called both Guillermo and Alan Moore little, so we know that I'm not speaking
little
in
Alan
actual
Moore
terms at all.
I would watch like the Adventures of Little Alan Moore though, like a little cute Alan. No, okay.
So here's the thing: the Alan Moore run on Swamp Thing with Stephen Bissett and John Tuttleben changed comics forever.
Amazing.
And the reason I read the Wrightson stuff was that I was like, I'm going to read the Alan Moore Swamp Thing. I should start at the beginning. So it was sort of this wonderful, pleasant surprise to me to find out that, like, the thing that was getting reinvented was an absolute masterpiece in its own way, just of a totally different style. So the Wrightson Swamp Thing is Professor Alec Holland, who was working on a secret formula, a biorestorative formula, that was such an interesting clandestine project that the government was like hiding him out so foreign agents couldn't like come steal it. So they put him in this like barn in the middle of the swamp, in I'm gonna say Louisiana.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Unfortunately, some bad dudes found Dr. Alec Holland and his wife, Dr. Linda Holland. And things immediately went very, very wrong.
There was a bomb taped, like literally sticks of dynamite taped to the bottom of his desk, if I recall, like full on. Look under the desk, and there's like, there's some sticks of dynamite taped to your
yes,
chem
so
lab.
we will. I have a trade paperback. First, I'm going to show off this lovely laboratory that they arrive at.
Yeah, here, well, a clip.
You the clip?
Yeah, I'm the clip. Oh, I love that. It's so like it's his art style to a T. It's everything that's lovely about his art
And
style.
we will get to this in a bit, but
well, this is
Zach,
also.
if you have up the laboratory shot from Wrightson's Frankenstein, did you get that one?
Yep. We can also say that this is the first issue of this is currently free on Comixology,
Yes!
so you can just click. You can literally click a couple
It'll
buttons.
take some clicking around. You want the 1972 Swamp Thing. They're pretty much all good, but this is the one that has the free issue 1.
There's not a lot of bad Swamp
Thing.
Thing.
If we have the laboratory.
Yeah, wow, like the monitor can't even contain that. There's just so much happening.
So we haven't gotten there yet, but Wrightson eventually illustrates an edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which belongs in if it's not in the Library of Congress, it should be. But we're going to go back to the brilliant comic booky goodness of 1972, and this bomb strapped under the table.
Well, there's Frank. Yeah, there we are. Bomb struck on the thing, and it explodes, and he's on fire, and he goes running into the swamp.
But he's coated in all his own weird chemicals. So what goes into the swamp is Dr. Alec Holland.
But what emerges the night after?
Something that pulls itself upright on unsteady legs, searching its cloudy mind for a fragment of memory, then pauses, studying its gnarled, misshapen hands, examining the clusters of root, the crumbling chunks of moss, and in that frightening, mind-shattering second, knows what it has become.
Dun dun dun.
I'm gonna...
The weirdest nose in all of comics.
Read this while doing this.
I love it.
Okay, and in that frightening, mind-shattering second, knows what it has become. A muck-encrusted, shambling mockery of life. A twisted caricature of humanity that can only be called... Swamp Thing. So these issues, and I'm going to show off a couple more panels from these first 10 issues of the 1970s Swamp Thing. I mean, you know, no big thing, right? This is comic book art. No one should take it seriously. It can't have amazing landscapes evocative of poetry and deep meaning and gorgeousness. There we go. I love this layout here. If you look at the castle.
Beautiful.
Sorry about the
It's
Post-its.
hilarious.
More wonderful laboratories.
He draws a lot of laboratories and libraries.
And these, the arrival of Arcane's Unmen. Wrightson was very good at monsters.
Very, very good at monsters.
Wrightson was very, very good at mood and monsters and the human and inhuman coexisting. They only did 10 issues of this book. It came out every other month, so it was almost 2 years that Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson worked on this together. And it has not stopped reverberating through comics since. The book kept going after them to like issue 24, I think, in that original run. They're interesting stories, but what you really want is those first 10. And it reached a whole lot of people. Some of the people it reached were baby Alan Moore. And this is my favorite part.
Who was nothing but beard when he was born.
It was just beard slowly growing a man.
And pacifier.
Yeah, the beard slowly grew a man. Yeah.
This is, unfortunately, I've lost the full text, but there.
I can give you the run of the Alan Moore run.
It's in the videos that I did on something. There was a reprint of the Wein Wrightson stuff with a 1986 commentary by Alan Moore on how incredibly intimidated he was because he could not possibly live up to these works, which were even better than he remembered them. There is a fantastic story told separately by, I found it in Alan Moore's 1986 column, and then in Len Wein's introduction to the reprint of the Alan Moore stuff. They both tell the story of when, I'm skipping forward in time, but when eventually they are looking, they've brought Swamp Thing back and they need a writer to take over about 20 issues into the new run. And Len Wein calls up this guy who's been working on 2000 AD, who kind of seems impressive and like maybe he'd be a good fit. And he calls Alan Moore, and Alan Moore hangs up on him.
In very Alan Moore fashion.
Because he assumed one of his friends was screwing around with him. Because there was just no way that Len Wein, co-creator of Swamp Thing, was calling him at his house in England to offer him Swamp Thing. Because Alan Moore had never written a full-length monthly book. Okay, I'm way ahead of myself.
Keep going. This is
No,
fun.
you're on. We're on.
You're not ahead of yourself.
In between...
Chat room's good.
Yeah, in between...
Yeah, I'm watching it. We're
this
good.
one
Keep going.
And this one, this work reached a lot of people, and one of those other people reached by this work was, I'm going to do it again, a little guy called Wes Craven, who was like, you know what was great? Swamp Thing. Someone should make a Swamp Thing movie.
Oh, man.
I haven't seen the movie.
Oh, boy.
But the movie is also a huge part of history, both because a lot of people do fondly remember it.
Yes.
And because DC went, oh, we're making a movie out of that book we canceled like 7 years ago. We should probably make some more Swamp Thing comics. And that was when they started the 80s run of Swamp Thing.
Was that with Alan Moore then?
No.
Okay.
It was I think Martin Pascoe wrote the first chunk of those. And they're good. They're interesting stories. But then the aforementioned, he was moving on. Len Wein needed somebody to sort of keep the book going from this momentum of like, he's got a movie out. We should probably be doing something. I wonder if there'd be anybody good for this.
And they call Alan Moore.
Well, bam.
Twice. They call Alan Moore twice.
Alan Moore's version is that he just sort of stammered and nearly insulted him out loud, but I'm going to go with Len Wein's version that he actually hung up on him because it's much funnier.
Yeah. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
Where he probably stammered and said something about how he's an idiot. Like, don't insult me. There's
shut up,
no
asshole.
way you're Len Wein hanging up.
I like that we went to the classic phone, too, as opposed to
classic-
we didn't do that. We didn't do this.
Yeah, we
which
didn't
is now
click.
the thing.
It was
this.
Yep.
And then he hit his rotary and called his mom and was like, tell my friends to stop calling me.
Yeah, but in a Northampton accent.
Yeah,
So
which I'm not even going to try.
The origin, oh God. The origin's
So
changed.
here's the thing.
The origin changed. when
I'm
Alan
not
took
sure
over.
I want to tell them
No.
the new origin because
It's so good.
The first issue of Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing, he wraps up all the storylines that had been going for issues 1 through 19. So he does 20, and then issue 21 of Swamp Thing, now called Saga of the Swamp Thing, from DC Comics, before Vertigo existed, before Image existed, before any of this stuff, is called The Anatomy Lesson. And I think it is one of the
God,
masterpieces
it's
of comic book literature.
brilliantly scary. Yeah, you don't. We can't spoil anything because it's so brilliantly interesting and scary and such an interesting take. It changes the character forever.
It does.
In a great way. It changes his relationship to his wife. He's still the Swamp Thing. This was the run that introduced a little character called one of the other great horror heroes of comic books, John Constantine. So,
who I will always call Constantine, even though that's wrong.
I know I go back and forth, but like
it's supposed to be Constantine, and none of us can ever
none of us
remember
say it's
that.
Constantine.
No, because it's Constantine.
The Hellblazer.
But he's a side character in Swamp Thing. I think issue 37.
That sounds
is
about.
where he shows up.
Saying sure.
So you're bringing all this up in the chat. We have Umbrasil. Question: what is the origin of the connection between Constantine and Swamp Thing?
Literally, John was a guest. Like if I recall the issue, it starts with Swamp Thing buried up to his neck, trapped, and John Constantine smoking a cigarette over him, going, "It's a pleasure to meet you." Basically,
I thought they met in a pub, but that might be
I think that's later.
I think you're right.
I think it starts with John like weirdly capturing him and being John just shows up and is a jerk. John Constantine, by the way, if you saw the TV show, which actually was a very loving rendering, although a little softened for television.
I haven't watched it.
It was as good as it was ever going to get, which was pretty damn good. And the actor portraying him, I think, did a wonderful job. And he also guest starred in an Arrow episode, which was surprisingly awesome.
Yeah, it really was.
Constantine, I know teenage boys from my generation, all started wearing trench coats and smoking silk cut cigarettes because of this.
He was just so dang cool.
He was so dang cool.
Smoking is bad.
Smoking is bad. Silk cuts especially. But good music, it was the notion of this guy walking around with enormous amount of taste being an asshole was really pleasing to a lot of, and he's a great character. He's been
the
written
original
by,
instructions to the artist were make him look like Sting.
Yes, he looks very much like Sting.
Yeah,
was it
I think
Missat
it
or
was.
Totalman or Veach who was the artist on that first appearance?
Remember.
Okay.
I don't have it written down either.
Sorry, guys.
But it's a character, it's a horror anthology character where he walks around, he's kind of like a black magician who's kind of pissed off one
As
too
in
many
works
people.
in black magic.
Yeah. Oh no, that's the Black Magician is a whole other set of books. But it sort of created that outcast sorcerer vibe that really lent itself to some amazing stories. They've done the John Constantine. I'll go Constantine now because it's easier. The cancer story. He bargains with the devil to cure his lung cancer, which is amazing.
I've read only bits and pieces of Hellblazer. I mostly knew him again because I met him in the pages of Sandman.
Every serious British writer has, and a few of the serious American ones, has taken a stab at Hellblazer for a few issues.
Which I'm going to stop and say that this. So they've brought Swamp Thing back from the dead hilariously and reinvented him into something new and brilliant. And if you watch my stupid videos, I make a huge meal out of the fact that see, get it, reinvention, get it, formula, genius, the whole thing, it all works.
I legitimately love the new direction that Alan Moore took. Not that I even felt like Swamp Thing needed it, but when Alan Moore addressed it and what he did with it, I was like, oh, that's good. No wonder
you guys
Alan Moore.
It's so hard talking about a twist without, and then later, Swamp Thing meets Superman, and what is considered to be one of the great Superman stories of all time.
I'm going to write that down
in the meantime,
I can go read that.
The original, so Len Wein had been editing, it's one of the annuals, right?
It's called, it'll come to me. Chat room will answer.
Chris, what's the name of the Swamp Thing Superman crossover?
Gift, no. The Red Fever, or...
Sorry. We will get back to it. It's a fantastic one. The annual also where he teams with Phantom Stranger.
Oh.
And that's one of the all-time great stories. And then, of course, Swamp Thing, The Rite of Spring, will be the creepiest, sexiest, scariest, most wonderful exploration of love that you
It's amazing.
will read in comics. In the meantime, the book, its original editor, Len Wein, co-creator of Swamp Thing, moved on to other pastures, and a new editor took over right shortly after Alan Moore began, and her name was Karen Berger. And Swamp Thing became a very well-received book. They slowly started altering the way they were presenting it. So this was before there was like a mature reader's line exactly. No one knew quite what to do with it because it was this DC character who had met other superheroes, but it's sort of, they wanted to do different things that didn't quite fit in with the rest of the books. So at first they were printing sophisticated suspense at the top.
I've forgotten about that.
Which is, I think, a fantastic way of, like, that was what they were doing. They were trying, they were trying to say mature readers. And eventually, during the run of this book, they just went ahead and said, we're going to put like a separate name on this and some of these other titles that we're working on that feel like their own thing, that's separate from what we're doing at the rest of DC Comics. And it was called Vertigo. And if y'all have been watching for a couple weeks, you know that, like, changed the whole day.
We're working our way to a long
Sandman,
talk to Vertigo.
Hellblazer, every week is Vertigo week. Sandman, Hellblazer, ultimately Fables by the Last Man, but, like, most of the most influential comics of the late 80s and early 90s came out of the vision and leadership of Karen Berger and the incredible talents of the folks doing this. And it all started with one of her first, like her second or third, I think, editing gig.
Yeah.
Was Swamp Thing. And they made some dang magic.
Our running parallel for Swamp Thing that I really like is it's kind of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer of like the modern horror book, and then Hellblazer is the Angel series that kind of was spawned from it, and like in some ways outdid it, but in many ways like it's just sort of like and then gave birth to all this other shit that's really kind of fantastic.
Why does Sandman fit in there?
Sandman. Oh, it's the Battlestar Galactica, I suppose. I'm not entirely sure. That's my best. I got nothing. I haven't thought it through. The metaphor breaks down. No. I want to bring up one of my Swamp Thing favorites, which is a weird one. There was a weird run. There's some of my favorite writers have written. So like Desart did a run that's really good.
Do 40 issues, 60 issues, something.
And they're amazing.
It's across 6 trade paperbacks.
In the Superman crossover, Superman actually like gets sick. He gets infected by like a Kryptonian virus and starts to go nuts. And like actually, he's like he can't remember who he is, and he's starting to become dangerous and having like little fits. And so he like drives. He abandons everything and like drives out down to the south to kind of like just hopefully die in peace. And he can is just burning up with fever. And like the Swamp Thing finds like he doesn't even know who he is. Just this insane man with lasers coming out of his eyes who's just rambling and like heals him. It's really great. It's a great story.
It's one thing develops a very interesting relationship.
No, I couldn't find it, but I'm gonna go look it up. And
it's amazing.
Read it because it sounds great.
But they also did, and like
it's one thing develops a very interesting relationship to nature, and it's sort of a very like ecologically progressive book.
Well, and then there was Tefe Holland.
Okay, and you have to fill me in here because I never got that far.
Tefe Holland. Okay. Here's a whole thing.
Alan Moore, I think Nancy Collins had written it.
About 2000.
Yeah.
It was about the year 2000. This is what got me into Swamp Thing because I was like aware of him and kind of thought he was cool. And then this was before it was really like a thing to do these kind of character reboots. Like it was very, very rare to like take a just to give why they do this. It's really, really hard to get people to read a new book in comics. Like it's almost if you start a new superhero, no one's gonna read it. Which is why like they do team books all the time because then there's characters that people know and they kind of like they gravitate toward it and hopefully you can like build up the popularity of those books. But like there's a reason there's never even been like they try and do like a rogue comic book and no one's like even that is not enough to as much as everybody loves Gambit and Rogue. It's tough to get a new character going. So you can kind of take a title that already has some clout. Like you can make a Superman book and put a new character in Superman for a while and let them be the lead in the book and see if people will then follow them out into their own bubble, which works really well, which is why we have like 2 new Iron Mans right now that aren't Iron Man.
One
see
of
if
them
anybody,
is Dr. Doom.
One of them is Dr. Doom. So Swamp Thing had a daughter, which is kind of complicated and it involves artificial insemination and some very iffy genetics with his wife. And it's a whole thing.
So wait, when you say daughter, do you mean like swamp daughter or human daughter?
She is a human girl.
Okay.
With his wife. That I'll get into some of it. He kind of asked John Constantine if he can borrow his body to kind of have normal human sex with his wife and have a daughter.
Is that really what happens?
That's kind of like I'm fudging it a lot because it's been a long time. I feel like that happens
to Constantine a lot.
He definitely is like
he's
the guy who's like
the kind of trouble he'd get into.
Sting.
It's like Sting, I need you to come have sex with my wife, please. It's very French. But it got a little weird. I don't want to get too far into it because I want people to discover. But she was fine, and then one day she cracked and has these like she's kind of half human, half Swamp Thing. So she just ends up kind of this weird mess. There she is on screen right now, manifesting some swamp powers, and she has all the bioregenerative and kind of falls apart and turns into like the green powers that her dad has. And she had her own anthology series of just kind of being this half-human plant creature who was working as kind of she was asked by the consciousness of all plants on Earth to be their representative on Earth, because they're like, we need a human to talk to humans, and we're going to pick you. And we're not happy.
So kind of like a better version of The Happening.
I don't know The Happening.
Is this where I get killed by Taliesin?
Yes, it's really don't know the hat. Don't bother. Don't bother. Don't even bother. No, it's a movie.
No.
Nothing. But yes,
No.
it's kind of a fun like take on this like interesting teenage girl who's just it's a little punk rock. It's very violent. She finds John eventually, and they have a talk. It's really great. It's an amazing.
And who wrote this one?
I don't remember
because I think it might actually be Brian K. Vaughan.
It feels very Brian. It might be Brian K. Vaughan because it feels very Brian K. Vaughan.
Let me throw this out real quick. Jim Jammin' Away says DC Comics presents number 85 as the Superman Swamp Thing crossover that you were talking about.
Thank
you. The Jungle Line.
Actually, I have
What's
it right.
that?
The Jungle Line.
The Jungle Line?
Yes, that's the name
Lion
of it.
or line?
Line.
Line. All right.
It is indeed Brian.
Thank you.
It is indeed Brian K. Vaughan. I actually, I'm actually here.
DKV?
I'll put a cover up so
also
you guys
went
can
on
see.
to do some things. So DC Comics Presents, you might notice, is the kind of title that you can give to books that are anthologies. You can tell lots of different stories in them.
She has white
It's
hair.
a really good story, y'all.
Yeah, that's actually a run I would definitely recommend people checking out because you can kind of start it suggested for mature readers. You can kind of start it as it is.
Can I throw out this question very quick from Compel Bast?
Yeah.
Question: is there a relationship between Poison Ivy and Swamp Thing?
What? That's such a good question.
That's such a good question.
I don't know if anyone has gone there.
Well,
and that seems silly.
I don't think there
they
is.
have to have gone
Yes.
there.
Okay. Well, one of the things that DC.
I mean,
I
not-
don't think they're
like
related.
originally.
Well, here's the thing. One of the things that DC did that was really interesting in the 90s was that they kind of created the notion that there are fundamental natural forces in the universe, and one of them is called the green, and one of them is called the gray. And the green is the powers of extropy. The green is the thing that makes life grow, and the gray is entropy, is the things that and so there are creatures and there are avatars of the gray on Earth, and there are avatars of the green, like the gray, like Solomon Grundy is an avatar of the gray. He's all extropy, and he's basically Solomon Grundy is a Batman villain who just says Solomon Grundy born on Monday. He was like the guy who died in a swamp, much like Swamp Thing, but he came out dark and wrong and murders people.
Yeah.
And so he's the avatar of destruction in that end, whereas he's kind of the opposite of Swamp Thing, who's that avatar of life. And they do like Professor. What is the guy? There was a villain who created Poison Ivy. It was also the man who like helped her create her formula.
Yes, I do
Who's
not
made
know.
of wood.
She's also
I know.
had a number of origins over the years. Part of it is
Yeah.
that like old school Poison Ivy's relationship to nature itself has sort of changed over time. Because she's such an old character.
They
She's had a
did
lot
tie
of
her in though
incarnations.
and they also tied her in with a character named Black Orchid, who's another Orchid. Thank you, Black
Sorry.
Orchid. No, thank
I got
you.
excited.
Who's another Vertigo part of that the green energy group of people who like protect life on Earth and
That
So-
mythology ends up getting added to and complicated in one of the. So we're gonna get to this
We're getting
in a bit.
so into
DC
it.
has a lot of different like. Part of the whole deal with comics is you end up reinventing things on a lot of occasions, and sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's less
this
great.
will literally be next week's show.
But one of the better things to happen in the line-wide new beginning that happened for DC in the year 2011 was a new Swamp Thing series. There hadn't been
Yeah.
one in a while, written by Scott Snyder, with I think Yannick Paquette. I'm not sure if that was the original artist or if it was somebody else first.
It was. I think it was the 52. Like for anything good or ill you can say about it, the horror books really did well.
So there'd been an increasing separation between the Vertigo titles and characters and the regular DC titles and characters since they were doing their own thing. And one of the things that they did in 2011 with this series of new beginnings for everyone in the DC universe was try to reintegrate all of those characters. And we can also we'll get to some of that stuff. Yeah. But one of the things where it kind of worked, another step in the long chain of people being intimidated to take on Swamp Thing because everybody thinks the one before was genius, which is just adorable, Scott Snyder was stepping into this like extremely famous and well-loved book and adding his own spin, and it actually went really great. They were also doing. Jeff Lemire was writing an Animal Man book.
That Animal Man where they invented the red, which was a whole nother.
And that's when they added
the red.
So the Swamp Thing is the Avatar of the Green, and Animal Man has another element of the natural world that he is tied to called the red. So these mythologies have gotten added to over time.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah,
Who was drawing that?
I don't know. I actually
remember loving the artwork in that.
I think Travel Foreman was the original artist on that.
It's one of my backgrounds on my computer. It pops up as him entering the red. It's
So
really
let me
good.
throw.
Okay.
Lord Entropy says, "Isn't the Florenic Man related to Poison
The
Ivy?"
Florenic Man.
And
That's the guy I
They
was
tied
thinking
the
of.
Floronic Man.
Clara the
Yeah.
Blade says, "Swamp Thing Woodrow, aka Floronic Man, Poison Ivy, and Black Orchid."
Yep.
Okay, Jason Woodrue, aka the Floronic Man. This issue, early on in the Swamp Thing run, is one of those things where you're like, "What am I? How is this good?" But what I didn't know is that they tied him in with Poison Ivy.
He was one of the. He urged her. He was like involved in her research and was like pushing her to like do that. Like he was one of her mentors, which is why she came out so weird. And they have a very weird relationship that's like not cool. It's very
Floronic
interesting.
Man has a very interesting.
Origin.
I think he thinks he's an anti-hero.
Yeah,
and
he
we
does.
might feel differently. But it is a pretty spectacular sort of humans versus environment issue early on in
Floronic
Alan Moore's
Man.
Swamp Thing.
Let me. May I ask a dumb question?
Always.
Pretend that I don't know who the Floronic Man is.
Could
Could you tell me anything about him?
he's hard because he's so deep. The Floronic Man is kind of another one of the plant, like he was another scientist. There's a series of scientists who
Mess around with plants.
mess around with plants and try and gain plant powers. And he was one of the earliest ones. He was like a proto Poison Ivy. And he got like all woody and kind of weird. And he's
Yeah, he sort of looks stalk-like with bushy elements.
yeah. Oh, he's up
Yeah,
on screen.
thank
There he
you.
is. He is creepy looking. Like he is a bad night in the
And I
woods.
think he probably started as sort of your ordinary kind of mad scientist villain, but then as people sort of took new approaches to things, like I specifically bonded to the version of him in the Alan Moore Swamp Thing where they kind of reinvent him in a more sinister way.
Yeah, well,
Not that he wasn't a bad guy.
Well, it was one of those things where like very much the Swamp Thing kind of had that Captain America vibe in DC, where like everyone keeps messing up because they're trying to make a super soldier serum, so you get all these really weird, bad attempts to make the Dr. Holland's Swamp Thing formula again, and so you get Poison Ivy and Orchid and the Floronic Man and all these like.
And this is something they go back and establish in this way that's really cool, even though obviously Poison Ivy was around long before there was a Swamp Thing.
But we go and we stitch her into the whole thing. The swamps have a lot of power in DC Comics. DC Comics loves the swamp, man. Bad
It is
things
a funny
come out of
thing.
the swamp.
Alan Moore talks about how intimidated he was, like that. He was writing about Louisiana, a place he had never been to. He was from England.
Yeah.
Not a lot of down home swampy goodness there.
Well, like even like Morrison's Seven Soldiers of Victory book starts with the mystery men in their cabin in the swamp, which is
Still need to
very
read
much.
Seven Soldiers of Victory.
You will love Seven Soldiers of Victory, but he had this whole theory of like some like even architects of the very universe living in a cabin in the bayous deep in the bayou. What were they? They were the storytellers, and they were sewing suits of everybody's death. It was so good.
Oh,
It's
that's
so
awesome.
It's so Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
Just yeah.
Okay, so in the meantime, I'm going to show off
Bring
a couple
some more stuff
of
up.
the original Wrightson covers, just because I grabbed a bunch of stuff from the store, and they are beautiful.
I love all these things that you grab from work.
I bring them back.
You're a terrible cheater that way.
If we can take a close-up look before I put these away, before we leave behind the original sort of straightforward, and the cool thing is, even in the course of these issues, you hit different classic horror genres. You get like a witch story and like a Clockwork City kind of deal, and the kind of mad science-y character Dr. Arcane, who will become very, very important in these later runs. And they very quickly, in these 10 issues, they sort of lay out a lot of ground that will be retreaded in beautiful, beautiful ways for decades to come.
Was that Kane on the cover?
I don't think so. I think
No,
this is
that's a demon. That's
this is
not
the
Kane.
Moors episode.
It looked a little bit like Kane for a moment.
Let me rewind this and kind of
Some
connect
werewolfy
some
goodness.
various pieces
Oh, yeah,
that we all
bring it,
talked
bring it.
about earlier.
Yeah.
Guillermo del Toro wrote the first draft and turned in the screenplay for the Justice League Dark film that they're now calling Dark Universe. And the reported villain in that is Anton Arcane and the Unmen, which you just mentioned. So I'm combining Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, yeah.
And what you just said about
And something
Arcane.
I just discovered, another thing that happened in 2011 when they folded some of these characters closer back in with DC is that they established a team for them and called it Justice League Dark, which is an odd idea, but had a bunch of the coolest characters in DC in it. And there was a recent animated movie, which I've heard is pretty good, but I haven't
I've heard
watched
that's good too.
I haven't seen it yet, but
that has been introducing a lot of people to these wonderful
I think
characters.
the horror end of these things is like the next film thing to get it's a good way to still do comic book movies but walk away from the superheroes.
Yeah, I agree.
And I would love to see, and I'll say like going in this direction and going a little bit away from like.
Oh look, we've got a.
Oh, there we go. We got a clip. Look at that. That happened.
That looks.
I should watch that. That looks. Oh,
Is that Dead Man?
That's Dead Man.
Yeah.
That's John Constantine and Dead Man being all snarky and like,
Zatanna back there,
Zatanna,
man. This
everybody.
This
A
looks.
lot of fantastic characters.
So like beyond like the DC level, but like the other thing that a lot of comic books held on to were the classic monsters.
Yeah.
We had the I Vampire books. And the I Vampire, what were some of they had a whole bunch of I ...
They're not actually related, I don't think.
They're not, but they were like they like the I monster was kind of a thing though that was kind of a
I think they
meta
were
brand.
probably all doing iClaudius riffs.
Yeah, well, and then it led to the show that we have now, iZombie.
And that one's more the like lowercase I, like
Yeah.
iPod, but
Yeah.
is a lovely book which came out of Vertigo.
Came out of Vertigo. It was one of the and
course
then
it did.
Tomb of Dracula, of
Chris
course.
Robertson and Mike Allred did iZombie.
Frankenstein, Agent of Shade,
Yeah, both companies have versions of Frankenstein in their universe.
and Dracula.
And I am going to actually circle back now. So Wrightson, before we leave him behind,
Oh,
did
yes.
like I'm most attached to his Swamp Thing just because I love them. But he did a lot of great work. He did Batman the Cult, which is fondly remembered by many folks. He did apparently a Spider-Man story called Hooky that I have not
Yes.
I have not read it, but I looked into it a little bit. Again, I was going to read it last night, and then I had a sick kitty. But Spider-Man Hooky has a villain in it named Torden Kakerlak. And their thing, I think Spider-Man ends up in another dimension because Spider-Man, and this entity becomes more and more powerful the more and more you defeat it. So with every
That's lovely.
personal victory, they come back even stronger, and then even stronger. And the artwork for it, again, like I was going to throw this into the Dropbox, but I didn't meet the timeline. That's on me, my fault. But it features, it's this very Cthulhian, very like Lovecraftian sort of monster. Just like it's very like sort of like a Shoggoth, just like reaching at him, and it has more and more creepy mouths on it, and it's fighting Spider-Man, and just like, well, I've never seen Spider-Man fight a thing like that before. Like, yeah, it almost looked like Venom. Like it could have almost been like.
Looks like this.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh wow, look at that. Good God.
Thank you.
You are on fire today.
Yeah, you're real good. So Wrightson also illustrated early stuff, not early stuff, but for Stephen King.
Yep. You did The Stand.
Yes, and
Can't remember.
I know we're
Did
blanking.
this
Wait,
something.
did he do Dark Tower?
I don't know my Stephen King.
Did he do Dark Tower?
He didn't eventually. He didn't work on like the comics they eventually did, but
No,
It's
but
just
I feel like
illustration
he
work from the
did
early
some
80s.
illustration, yeah, for.
That amazing Frankenstein.
yes. Can we bring Frankenstein back up because he
Just 'cause
did?
it's lovely.
Marvel published it, I think, originally, and it was not a full comic book. It was just an illustrated edition.
Oh, love it so much.
Mary
It took
Shelley's Frankenstein.
it took 7 years for him to complete it.
It is.
Partially because one of his like, and I did a lot of research into this last night because like again, Frankenstein is one of my favorite books, and I was excited to find out he did this. I had no idea that Wrightson had done this,
You
but
guys are getting so fancy with this. Look at that.
Zach.
Wrightson wanted it to look like it came from like wood carvings and wood blocks, so like he put that much more detail in it
Yeah.
to give it that 19th century
Beautiful.
feel.
You can see the commonality between his regular illustrated style and what he was doing there. But you can also see that he had time and like a specific different idea about expressing his sort of compositional skills and his wonderful monster impulses directed through that like woodcut fine art filter to get the unbelievable illustrations of his Frankenstein. which just Google his Frankenstein. They're like the scenes of the laboratory, the scene I think I posted on Twitter when we were talking about this. The initial moment where Dr. Frankenstein sees his creation, which has pulled back the drapes of the bed and stands revealed before him, much to his horror, is just incredible. And it looks like I'm just tweeting some weird giant torso, but expand it. It's a wonderful woodcut illustration.
Please click the torso. But it's interesting if you start delving into horror books, especially some of the classic horror books of the 70s. I was picking up my favorites this week, and like he just worked on all of them. Like I wasn't even looking for him, and he was everywhere. He did everything. It's his fingerprints are on every book I love of that genre. It's just nuts.
Good company. He was accompanied by many other very talented folks.
I had to like specifically find stuff he didn't do. It was I had to put effort into finding things that I could talk about that were not him.
So I know we want to move on. Do you want me to ask a few questions?
Yes, I feel like...
Before we leave Wrightson behind, I do want to add one more thing, which is that if you hadn't had a chance, there's a lot of great articles on him have come up this week, retrospectives on his career, and maybe just as importantly as his enormous talent, a thing that I've enjoyed in the last couple days is the torrent of stories about what a great guy he was. Just as someone with a long impact on the industry who we've recently lost, it's been really nice to read how many people's lives were touched, how many young artists said that he was like kind to them at their first convention, and then they were tabling together years later, and he just was apparently a good friend to many, many people and loved by many, many people, in addition to his enormous talent.
Jody,
so this
Jody
is our moment
Hauser
for
says,
Bernie Wrightson.
Well, it just moved.
Well,
Jody Hauser says that she bought a print from him last year, and that he was just the most lovely man in person and was very sweet and kind and to talk to.
I never met him. But
Yeah, so thank you, Jody.
I'm really glad that happened.
So you were saying people were saying those things, and
Yeah.
I wanted to throw that out there.
I meant that as agreement. I am really excited by that story.
We've been ignoring the chat for
Yes!
pull some.
All right, so question from again from Scorpions. Hello, Scorpions. Question: what is your biggest fear, and which comic book exploited the hell out of it?
Ooh.
That's fantastic.
See, because like my biggest fear is flying. I don't handle flying well. I'm to a point where I almost refuse to fly without my wife next to me because she calms me down during takeoff and landing. But I don't know that any comic has ever exploited the hell out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of
My biggest fear. I won't say my biggest fear on camera because I don't want to give people ideas because
You're out there enough.
I'm out there enough and honest to God, like I feel bad if I punch somebody. Because I go I turn red, my vision goes red. And I'm like, oh my God, you did a thing that you thought was gonna be cute. Now I punched you. And now I feel really shitty. True story has happened. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of the scariest book I ever read, of like the comic book that really. There was a couple Tales from the Crypt that really. There was one where a guy buried his buried his wife up to her neck in the sand and videotaped her drowning, so because he was so angry at her or something, like she and her lover
Oh, that was in the movie.
But there was a comic version of it too, and then they came back and killed him, and that one was really waterlogged and drowned, and that one was really dark.
That sounds horrifying. Yes.
That was awful. I'm trying to. There was a. God, I don't know. Let me think about this.
This is a fantastic question.
The Sandman diner really.
The
fucked me
Sandman
up.
diner left a real impression.
That horrified me. God, let me. I will say, chunks of From Hell. From Hell, really.
I still haven't read From Hell.
Yeah,
Alan Moore's From Hell is a really. It's got a. I actually have a. I brought a thing. There it is. Just so you can kind of see the art. From Hell, they made a movie. Yeah, there we go. Although this is actually, I think this is classical art there, not really maybe I'll flip one. This is actually art from the era, but this is, there we go. There's the actual
Eddie Campbell?
Eddie Campbell stuff, which is really penciled and very loose. From Hell is a really interesting book. I don't recommend seeing the movie. I know that there is a movie. Ignore it. It has nothing to do with the book at all. And it's kind of it's a very interesting,
What's
weird...
From Hell?
From Hell is a book about the Jack the Ripper killings of the 19th century. and kind of Alan Moore's attempt to take a painstaking amount of research as to the look and feel of London at that time, and specifically of the Whitechapel neighborhood, and the events and people involved, and kind of stringing a narrative that is more or less functional. Like, that's the impressive thing about the book, is that if you get the big graphic novel, there are about 30 pages of panel by panel liner notes where they talk about how they figured out this is what would have been visible in that scene, the interiors of buildings, the fact that these two characters did have a conversation at that moment. It was a painstakingly researched piece of historical fiction, but then adding on this psychedelic serial killer vibe to it, giving there's no mystery in the book. It's William Gull. There's no mystery as to who Jack the Ripper is. You find out in chapter 2, called William Gull, and he's right there, and they're like, and the whole book is about why he does it and what's going on in his head, and sort of this him as an avatar for like the end of this age of man into this age of humanity. It's really interesting. It's dark. It's weird. It's sad. And it doesn't make you feel good.
Let's bounce into some of our other picks, and I wanted to get into some of people's recommendations online, because when you all sent us a bunch of great ones, and we're going to get immediately derailed because I have to laugh, because the first thing that happened when I posted my what are your favorite horror books?
Thank you.
Is a conversation I had about 1 hour previously with Taliesin.
About an hour previously.
Where I was like,
that is
we
my
should
favorite
talk about
book.
our other horror things. And he was like telling me about this book that I had never read, that was literally the first response from Jeremy Pinkham. Wasteland. You were just talking about how hard it is to find these days.
No one has ever heard. I've found it for sale on Amazon. I'm just buying single issues because I give up.
80s DC series co-written by Del Close, the influential improv comedy mentor to John Belushi, John Candy, Bill Murray, and many more.
Yep.
Wait,
Del
what?
Close
Del Close?
and John
What?
Ostrander wrote a series for DC. It looks
What?
like
A horror anthology.
it looks like pre-Vertigo because it's suggested for mature readers, but it has the
Pre-Vertigo.
old bullet logo DC. And it's called Wasteland. And take it away. What was that?
It's a non-hosted anthology. I think we have a Wasteland cover in the art bin. I gave a Wasteland there, a couple of them maybe.
And Jeremy Pinkham, this is why I just shouted OMG Taliesin when you tweeted this.
Yeah, because this is a book this is one of the first horror books I read, actually, and this had a huge impact on me. It had an impact on me as a writer. The book had so much character. It has a little bit of heavy metal vibe, if you know the heavy metal magazine of like.
Oh, which Wrightson also contributed to in one of his segments was used in the movie.
Yeah,
Forgot that in the rundown earlier.
It's of course, but it was a horror anthology that really went everywhere. There was no real connection with it. It was just, we're going to tell some cool, fun stories, and not really. Sometimes they were literally, that story would be the writers in the writers' room talking about the fact that they didn't have a good idea for a short for the book. That got really psychedelic.
Jeremy shares that there was even a horror parody of / tribute to Harvey Pekar, legend of independent comics publishing, to his book American Splendor.
Yes.
Where they made it unsettling rather than wacky in tone.
My favorite story from that book was one called Fugu, which were a bunch of rich people. These two cops find a dining room full of people who were just dead at a table, and there was a mushroom that they had cooked, and the deal was, you eat this mushroom and it's the most pleasurable experience you'll ever have, except it kills you. So these are just 12 rich people who have paid a fortune to somebody to cook this meal for them, knowing that it's the last thing, that they're going to die, and this is going to be the last thing, and why these 12 people decided to end their lives just by consuming this thing, and they're just these corpses with huge smiles, and it's so dark.
Well, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah, and it's just and the cops are freaking out, and there's not this. I'm spoiling it because you're never gonna find this book. And the cops,
I want to go find it.
The cops
now.
are
This sounds
freaking out, and they're
amazing.
who the fuck would do this? Why would anyone what? And one of the cops is just picking a piece up quietly, and it's so fucked up. It's great. It's so great.
Oh, I want to go find this book. It sounds so good.
Yeah, it's got a very heavy metal vibe. It's the 80s, but it's really good. And the thing with horror is, no matter what, it's going to be a little salacious and weird and dark and fucked up. And yeah,
You can explore a lot of interesting things through horror.
Wasteland. You can't find it on. It's unfindable, but it's great.
Give them time. They got to.
I keep hoping. I brought it up at a Vertigo panel once. I got laughed at. It's like, they're like, no, what's wrong with you? Really?
So Jose Hojilicious gave a shout out to the Tales of the Crypt comics. That said the barbershop had them, and it was all they had. Kathleen Evie gave a pick, which I think Matt is going to get into a little bit. Harrow County.
Boom.
Has been my favorite horror comic I have read in the past year. That's at Edie_K. What's Harrow County? Because people are flipping out.
Edie, well done. I'm about maybe halfway through it.
This is volume 2. We were out of one at the shop.
I'm halfway. I'm almost done with volume 2. It is so good. I was rereading what I'd read last night thus far. So I believe that it's about a main character named Amy, if I remember correctly, and she discovers that she is sort of like the rebirth of a witch that had terrorized this tiny village, and everyone in the village was afraid of her, and she didn't know why. And she kind of leaves the village frustrated one day, ends up being kind of followed by a dead boy's skin.
Wow.
And he becomes kind of like her best friend, just the skin, and she eventually, like, it gets a little bit deeper in that. I don't want to say anything beyond that, but she decides, oh, I'm not going to be evil, I'm going to be good. And then the village is like, oh, yay, we can use your help then, because we've got this weird thing living in our barn. We don't know what that is. Can you go? And she's like, yeah, that's a Hank. It's a ghost. I'll go talk to it, and I'm going to name it. It's Priscilla. It's like that. And they're all like, yay! But then, I won't tell you what happens, but it turns out there's another witch who is ill-intended.
Are you a good witch or a bad witch?
And she comes into town, and that is where I will leave it. But it is, I knew I liked it early on. But then somewhere around, I want to say issue 3 or 4. The artwork is gorgeous. I don't know who's the artist on it.
Tyler Crook, this is a Dark Horse
gorgeous.
book,
It's
by the
gorgeous,
way.
yeah.
We're giving a lot of Vertigo love, but Dark Horse
I'm going off
has
Vertigo
also
soon.
been incredible in terms of horror.
I'm really bad at
because
this,
you may
there we
know
go.
them from this guy's work.
Oof, I love Hellboy.
They are the home of Mike Mignola's Hellboy verse. Which includes Hellboy, the BPRD,
Abe Sapien, yeah.
Witchfinder, a whole network of different flavors of supernatural and suspenseful storytelling.
Yeah. So I knew I liked the book from issue 1. I was all about it. But then I brought my copy with me. And my wife Brittany actually loves these comics too. I was like, you should read these. I read them when I was doing the Eisners last year. This was one of the nominated Eisner books, and I was like, this is a good excuse to go catch up on a lot of this stuff.
The creepy skins are really
Dude,
creepy.
It's so
Holy
creepy,
cow.
right? Let me show you. This is where I knew I was hooked.
Yep. You went right to what I found just now.
The ghosts are all on fire. Like, the ghosts all come out on fire, and that's when I was like, well, this is a book I'm going to fall in love with, because this is an interpretation of ghosts I've never seen. And they immediately look terrifying. And I don't want to tell you anything. If you've read the book, you know why this is awesome. If you haven't read the book, go find out why it's a book. But look, like, there's the skin crawling away. See, it's so
good.
Yep.
It's so creepy, so wonderful.
Okay,
I love
so
it.
we had our
Harrow County.
Our first shout out for Uzumaki came from Ricky Galletti, which is that's the Junji Ito book. Spirals is another name.
I have another Japanese. It occurs to me I have a deep cut Japanese manga for those who are like.
Runic World wasn't your deep cut.
Oh, I can go deeper.
Okay.
Not surprising.
As a goth kid, I was a goth kid growing up. It's this apparently
What?
thing. Shut the fuck up, both of you. There was a manga that I was really into. It was like the gothiest manga that there was, called Gekeke no Kitaro.
I've heard of that, but I haven't read it.
Gekeke no Kitaro is kind of like the notion is it's a dead boy who lives in a cemetery. They've done animated versions. They've done live action. It's been going on for 50 years.
Is this Shigeru Mizuki?
It's with the little eyeball. His dad. There's nothing left of his dad other than an eyeball. So his dad just sits on his shoulders like a little eyeball, and all of his friends are ghosts or demons. And like the opening theme is this very nice like and it's like, and the whole song is like, being dead is fun, you don't have to go to school, and it's the creepiest. I have a little statue of it on my desk at home. Gekeke no Kitaro is Like, if you're looking for, like, spooky, fun kind of kid, like, for that kid who's already getting a little weird.
If I've got the right thing, they're finally putting the Katara books in nice English editions
They
that are
might
easy
be.
to find. This is, if this is
That's my
Shigeru
last
Mizuki's,
Japanese
Katara,
reference right there.
they are finally becoming available. He did a multi-part history of modern Japan called Showa. That was where I was like, who is this? This is fantastic. But he also was apparently massively more famous for his sort of folklore stories.
And they're very, like, a lot of Japanese folklore. There's an evil cat. There's like there's a cat girl who's like his kind of pseudo girlfriend because they're very young and like.
Taliesin, question from Autistic Cosplay.
Hi, it's a cosplay.
Have you heard of Mushishi?
Of course, love
Okay,
Mushishi.
so there you go, Mushishi. What is Mushishi?
I don't even want to. I can't do it justice. I know
Mushishi.
it's a. Oh God, somebody else can explain it better than me. Mushishi is a fabulous. I haven't read the manga, but I know I believe there's an anime thing for it. But yes, I know Mushishi. It's been so long. I will do it. I will fail because it's been so long since I've dealt with Mushishi.
Sub S Vid says, so I'm looking at a paperback version of Wasteland at my local Target. Joke's on you.
At your local Target. Okay.
There's another one called Wasteland.
Wait. Haha.
Check
Reverse joke.
There's an Oni book called Wasteland. Also comes highly recommended, but is a different
Is
thing.
a
Just
different
check
Wasteland.
if it's Del Close and John Ostrander. And if it is, then mock Taliesin.
Mock me then.
Yeah.
as
Mock
will.
What? Target's carrying
It's been
comics
so long since
now?
I've had to describe
This
Mushishi
is
to anyone. I'm
exciting.
kind of even. Okay, no, that's like nuts.
Okay, Ricky
Nothing
Glennie
about
also
Mushishi.
shouted out, I love horror is subjective, but he also added Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison.
Yes, Arkham. Batman does very good
Horror
horror.
of the human mind.
And Arkham, and it's also that artist is it's
That's Dave McKean, isn't it?
Dave, yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
McKean. It's amazing.
He would go on to do the covers on Sandman, which are pretty iconic in their own right.
Getting away from DC, I'll also say if you like that kind of EC 1960s horror vibe, Sabrina the Teenage Witch and
so
Afterlife with Archie.
So, speaking of weird twists that comics take over time, two of the most critically acclaimed and best received comics going right now are the terrifying Archie books.
That is a question from Cardinal Iron. Does Afterlife of Archie take its horror seriously, or is it more humorous?
It's scary.
Yeah.
It actually, like,
If I may,
there's an issue of Afterlife with Archie that made both of my coworkers cry.
There's nothing funny about Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
I haven't read Sabrina yet.
It's
Whitney Moore
really
swears
good.
by it.
yeah, I haven't read it yet.
I think
either.
we have a cover in the file. I think I pulled up a Sabrina the Teenage Witch cover just to kind of get the vibe of it, because you look at it and you go, oh, that's the book. Yeah, there's Sabrina. It's great.
Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, as they are calling it. Both of these books have their only flaw is that they are really inconsistent in their publishing schedule.
Who's publishing them?
Archie,
Oh, it's just Archie Comics.
just straight up Archie Comics,
man.
has their own line of incredible horror going on.
They come
right
out
now.
when they damn well please.
Afterlife with Archie is a zombie book that is venturing into some other territory as well, but starts out as a zombie sort of thing.
The Sabrina Jughead crossover made me very happy.
And Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is, of course, grounded in that character's tradition of witchcraft, just a much more serious version than we've seen.
Yeah, and it's set in the 60s, and it's very. Oh, there's Sabrina. There's Jughead meets Sabrina, which is a really good book that I like. Oh God, I feel
A lot of
weird
stuff
how
is
much I
going
like
on
Archie.
with the Archie stuff, and I guess it's not going to be so weird to you guys now because it's the same people in charge who were like, "Hey, we have an idea for a TV show. What if Archie was Twin Peaks?"
Which
I
have not seen it yet, but I hear really
people
good
are
things.
flipping out.
It's fun.
I'm very excited.
I was not expecting it to be quite as fun as I'm enjoying it.
It's also.
That has been said about pretty much all of the Archie
It's
stuff
also
going
not
on
the
for last
books.
several years.
It's not.
Even
It's not.
even the new books. It is not taking anything from the new books at all.
So let me throw this out there
Yes.
real quickly about Archie Afterlife. I've only read the first couple issues of that. I liked it a lot. I just didn't go back to it. But the question is like, is it seriously more humorous? I think that there is a bit of like irony in the like. I don't know that makes it humorous, but there is an irony in like, oh, we're doing a zombie crossover with Archie, and now Jughead is a zombie, and now we're going like, yes, it gets sad and all that other stuff, but I do think just inherent in the initial concept of it,
There's sort of a level
There
of
is
inherent
fun.
camp.
it's a bit
Fun.
There's an irony and humor to the basic concept.
And
I think.
they're sort of, as illustrated by one of the things, everything sort of kicks off at the big Halloween party. to which the characters have shown up in sort of meta commentary costumes, because I think Betty shows up as a nurse, like a wicked nurse, and Veronica shows up as a certain Vampirella. And I'm guessing I need to put down the recommendations because we're about to take a detour.
Okay.
As promised on Facebook Live by Taliesin earlier today.
Okay, we were all 13-year-old boys once.
Sure we were.
We were in our own way, I would like to say. And I'm not going to pretend that I didn't buy Vampirella comics because of the covers. I bought them because of the covers.
And they originally started in the Warren Magazine publishing family. The same people bringing you eerie and creepy. We're like, here's the pitch.
Vampirella, daughter of Dracula.
Naked.
Yeah, by nearly naked, then like she is more nearly naked than like, it's like someone figured out a way to like turn Doctor Strange's cloak into a bathing suit mode. It is like, it's intense. There she is. This was like the least lurid cover I could find, and I was like going through like what is the least lurid Vampirella cover ever, and that would be the one. They were great. The interior art, I've got to say, is stunning. It is definitely erotic. It is definitely sexually charged. I give it kind of a vibe. If you're a fan of Barbarella, and if you're down with that vibe, like there are books that are very exploitive. This one is less so. Like there's a trend in there, especially I've been going back and reading it, and they're definitely lascivious villains, and it's all there's a lot of, boy, I shouldn't use that word, it's too big.
Lascivious?
Lascivious is a little too.
That's a great word. I don't.
There's a lot of we shall punish these evil men for daring to think about grabbing boob, but like. It's a good moral tale, but it's definitely like they are aware that she is basically on display at all times and is kind of played for what it is. And they're really well written, and they're really scary, and they're really well drawn. And I found out that other than just Trina Robbins, who helped create the character, Forrest J. Ackerman.
Trina Robbins helped create Vampirella?
It's according to Wikipedia.
Trina Robbins is a comic book historian and old school creator who I completely
Or I might be
adore.
like, I'm going to double check that now because I found Forrest J. Ackerman's name also connected to them. I was like, that's nuts.
I know very little about Vampirella.
JJ Dane on the live chat says Vampirella had stories.
No, it's like going back now as an adult who can deal with this now.
They're still publishing Vampirella books. Different companies have had her sort of rights over the years. Currently, she's at Dynamite.
Yamo says, I heard Kiss meets Vampirella #1 comes out today.
Yep.
Is that a thing that's happening?
That is a thing that's happening. Well, and like...
Should be.
There was a new issue of Kiss today. There was a new issue of Vampirella last week. Paul Cornell has just started on it. There was a 6-parter by Kate Left last year where they gave her a new outfit, which I actually quite liked, but they still kept the other outfit as this like cute, like she wears it at night sometimes.
They've done a couple different versions of the outfit, and they've done certainly like much more reasonable versions of the outfit in various different forms. And yes, Trina Robbins and Forrest J. Ackerman. Forrest J. Ackerman, who's kind of also like I couldn't
Can
really...
we justify? He's not really... I guess we can't have a comics thing just on Forrest Ackerman.
We could.
As we said earlier, I don't think any of us would be here without Forrest Ackerman because he half invented fandom.
I think that's actually very fair to say that he is like one of the godfathers of fandom, of the notion of being this into something.
Yeah, he showed up with is known as one of the first cosplayers because he and his girlfriend made the costumes. They showed up in what they called their futuristic costumes at one of the very first World Science Fiction Convention in the late 1930s, I think.
Dead and gone now, bless him.
And by World Science Fiction Convention, we mean probably 24 people somewhere in Boston.
Born 1916.
Look up her name because this is killing me. She made the costume. She essentially invented cosplay. But they showed up together in sort of outfits that were an homage to a recent science fiction film.
Myrtle Douglas?
Myrtle.
Designed and created by Myrtle Douglas in 1939. They showed up the first World Science Fiction Convention in futuristic costume, is what they called it.
And there are some really adorable photos of this. They both stayed involved in fandom. Forrest Ackerman would go on to found the magazine Famous Monsters of Filmland, which was also a huge influence on a bunch of these sort of horror creators over time. He was also famous for having his home in Los Angeles was one of the first museums of science fiction pop culture, and his home was a private collection of
costumes and magazine, and like he would take people on tours, and it was the thing to have happen. Like to be invited to the Ackerman home was to the point where before he died, they attempted to photograph it and put out a CD-ROM. A CD-ROM.
Wow.
Google that if you don't know what a CD-ROM is. I'm actually gonna I have a great picture here just to sort of give a vibe. Thanks to I apologize if any of my calendars go nuts or I get texted while this happens, but.
Hey, you are a jerk. I need to text Taliesin right now.
Yeah, no, Forrest J. Ackerman in his collection was citywide, world famous. People would come from around the world in the hopes of getting a tour of the Ackerman estate.
Caroline the Geek says, whoa, quote, in 1953 he was voted #1 fan personality by the members of the World Science Fiction Society, a unique Hugo Award never granted to anyone else.
Yeah. Dude, so we have a lot that we owe him.
We do.
But I did not know that he was involved in the creation of Vampirella. Very him. And it's an interesting character.
God bless Trina Robbins, who is just a living legend and an amazing historian and comic book creator. I had no idea.
Yeah, and if you're in the mood for a little more Barbarella fun, like if you saw Barbarella and you're one of those people who are like, I don't want them to remake it, but damn, I wish there was more.
Yeah, I can't personally vouch for the old
too.
Vampirella stories because I haven't really read any of
Yeah,
them. But there's
same.
absolutely a place for
The
storytelling.
film, the film gets the vibe pretty solidly.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh no, the only way through is to remove your garments. We know not of your earth sex culture here. We take pills and join hands. There's a lot of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
For the record, there are things. I object to the element of comics where you get into a place where every single woman and every story involving a woman has to be that. But that's never meant to say that you can't tell sexy, fun stories.
Yeah.
No, it's,
Those are different things.
Yeah.
The idea that everyone's costume should be Vampirella's is stupid.
and
It's real dumb.
Her
But
book, I
the
feel
idea, that there's something wrong with telling sexy, fun stories.
No, it's
Not at all.
it's tantalizing and not and only occasionally crosses into salacious, and it doesn't
If
stay
you come
there.
at me with she wears it because she wants to, I'm gonna give you a serious look because it's by all means create characters who want to tantalize people, but don't pretend that you didn't make those decisions. The characters are not sentient.
No, and boy, I love every one of my cosplay friends who the first time they picked up Vampirella and went challenge fucking accepted. I love challenge accepted, and it's such an iconic costume in its own way, and I'm so glad they never it's of its own time and place beautifully.
Speaking of challenge, White Wabbit says, question, can Matt pronounce amaranthine oubliette? So I guess I
Can you?
I guess I just amaranthine oubliette. I don't
I
know
love
why.
a good oubliette.
Yeah.
An oubliette is a good thing.
Oubliette is the place at the Ren Fair that I get into the most trouble.
We do not speak of the oubliette.
The oubliette at Ren Fair, it's the bar at the
Okay,
Ren Fair
There's
here.
a bar called Oubliette.
For those of you who don't know what the Southern California Renaissance Fair oubliette is, it is a bar at the Renaissance Fair where they serve the mixed mead drinks, and
They are dangerous.
bad thing. This is where you go to die.
Yeah.
It is not funny.
Yeah.
I've seen mighty people fall.
Which is the bar where they make you
That's the oubliette.
That's the oubliette.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah, I've been
I like
there.
that. That's as far as we go.
Yeah.
They make you.
That's the oubliette.
Yeah, they when they finish pouring, you put your mouth to the cup and you keep drinking,
There are
and they
certain
keep
rituals
pouring.
surrounding
Yeah.
the serving of drinks at this place.
Oh.
Yeah,
It's
it's
rough.
a long line and it's well worth it because you only have to wait in line once.
It's yeah.
If you order 2 drinks at once,
No.
Just go
you don't
home.
have to go back.
Yeah.
Yep.
You lie down and prepare for the headache that will come.
Yep.
Oubliette.
So let me also ask this. Cakes. Question, what's the worst horror comic you've ever read? Sorry if this was asked already.
Worst.
Scariest or bad?
Well, we can go both, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's a bad horror.
See, the problem is we probably can't remember the bad ones because if you don't
Yeah.
make an impression, you have not done
Yeah,
a
I
very
suppose
good job
that's
with your horror.
yeah. Because if you're not scared, horror is hard to do. Horror, I know people schlock it all the time, but being genuinely scary is really hard.
Yeah.
What's funny is the question earlier about your biggest fears. I immediately flashed to that it's not horror at all. But when I read on one of our watchers' recommendations the recent issue of Green Lanterns where Jessica has the anxiety attack, that was the first thing that popped into my head because I was like, that was a really good
real
evocation
scary.
of a thing that
Happens.
does actually terrify me. Although, like, probably my real answer to that question would be, like, the human cruelty stuff in Sandman. Because if you have to put a book down for 7 years, it probably was pretty scary.
There's some heavy stuff that happens.
And for the record, Sandman isn't just horror. It's also fantasy. It's a million different things. It's just really good at horror.
Yeah. It does it very well.
So, Sean Bryan 318, a lot of these recommendations are very classic American horror, ghosts, zombies, etc. I absolutely love those, but they don't scare me the same way cosmic horror like H.P. Lovecraft does. Do you have any recommendations for those? I actually want to hear this answer too, because cosmic, like, I think probably existential horror would probably be what would scare me the most. Like, that's one of the reasons I love H.P. Lovecraft the most. So, like, going back to the question of, like, what scares you? And I was like, flying? I don't know. It's the existential horror, like that sort of like, we're all meaningless, there is no God, like that kind of stuff. I'm just like, I don't want to consider that.
It's an indirect connection, because this is more drawing on the sort of the symbolism and trappings of Lovecraftian horror, and less the sort of existence. Like, this uses kind of the monsters and the viewpoint of it, but isn't exactly about existential horror. This is a Brubaker Phillips book that I highly recommend called Fatale, which is about a woman with a unique connection to some of these Lovecraftian forces in different eras of time that was really, really lovely. But existential.
Well, I mean, like, I will say, I think, like, especially the Alan Moore Swamp Thing is a lot of existential horror.
It's the question of humanity and, like, the fight over whether things have meaning,
identity, and it can get very, very heavy in that direction. I'd
like
also
philosophical horror, existentialism, like that kind of stuff. That's where I'm just like, my heart starts to beat, the most.
I was going to avoid this book this week, but since they brought it up, Morrison's Animal Man is DC's greatest delving into there is no God, we are alone, fear the world. I feel like there's a whole nother show I want to do on it, but I'm learning now not to shy away from it, just because. For those of you who don't know Morrison's run on Animal Man is a superhero, named Buddy, who's his power set was that he could gain the powers of any animal he's nearby, but like by powers, like there are birds in the sky, so I can fly. There are lizards, so I can regrow limbs. Like, it's really dumb. And he was this really like over schlocky, hard to write because it's just the power set's too weird and too easy and too poorly thought out. But his other hook was he was the superhero who had a wife and kids and actually was stable. And Morrison kind of took him, and for reasons that he gets into later in kind of a very interesting meta text, like, I kind of wanted to take this character and pull him apart by the, literally pull him apart by this very core until there was nothing left, and watch what happens when you torture a fictional character to death. And kind of does.
This was also a Vertigo book. Grant Morrison was someone else recruited by Karen Berger.
Yeah.
And these guys were all sort of trying to one-up each other in terms of, like, doing interesting stuff, and it worked out real nice.
Yeah, Animal Man actually ends, and Morrison's done this a couple times since, where he's taken characters and, like, given them enough agency to recognize that they're not even really people. That they're not complex enough to be people, therefore they're small, and it's really, and like there are things I don't want to spoil. There were moments in that book that I had to put it down, like he does peyote in the desert at one point with some friends, and things happen during Animal Man, and like the book happens, and at one point I just had to close the book and put it down and walk away. I was so disturbed. Like, deeply and fundamentally disturbed.
I gotta search my heart, because I know I've done that on a couple of occasions, and I should have figured out, like, what are the books that have made me do that?
Game of Thrones, like, when I was reading, like, The Red Wedding, I was like, and I didn't touch it for, like, 6 months. I was like, I kept going and, like, telling my now wife, Brittany, oh my God, this is the greatest book, you're gonna love it. And then I got to The Red Wedding, I was like,
you know what's
never
funny?
Mind. I'm done.
Game of Thrones, like, it was the first wolf that got me.
Yeah.
Because that was when they broke my expectations of what sort of the rules were.
Sure.
And so every terrible thing that happened after that, like, the sort of Band-Aid was already off, because I was like, we're not in the world I'm used to, because you wouldn't you wouldn't do that. It was just funny. Like, even it's not that I wasn't surprised and terrified and traumatized and sad about all of the things that happened after that, but that was the moment where I lost my sense of safety in that world.
Yeah, agreed.
I would say Morrison's Animal Man is one of the great early metatextual, like, we're going to frighten you on that cosmic level.
I have not finished the Animal Man run, but one of my favorites, it's early on in the comic, is where he runs into that villain who is combining animals.
Yeah.
Who's that? What do you remember that?
I don't remember,
name?
but I know where you are in the book.
It is so creepy because, like, at the end of that particular story, he ends up combining this kind of scientist who's, like, experimenting on animals with a monkey that he'd been experimenting on. And then they all walk, like, the people, like, lab people come in. They're like, "Who is this guy?" And he's like, "I'm not a monkey," but he can't talk because he's been I was like, ooh, fitting in, but ooh, like, well, really kind of creepy. Yeah.
I'm gonna slam us through a couple more of these because there's some fantastic suggestions in here.
Oh yeah.
We had a shout out from Andrew Ribeiro to It's Not a Comic, but Wrightson's art on Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf. That was what I was trying to remember. Was just perfect. Michael Connor also had a shout out for Spirals by Ido Junji or Uzumaki. We have Kyle Vaught. I don't know how to say your last name.
Vogt?
VOGT.
Kyle, friend of the show, Kyle.
Werewolf by Night, 2 and Dracula, Swamp Thing, Creepy Magazine.
Very good taste.
All writes and good stuff. Kelly Twetton, I'm sorry if it's tweeting, said The Enigma of Amigara Fault by Junji Ito, if inspiring nightmares years later, counts as a favorite. It does. Fiona Dunn has a wonderful pick here. Black Hole, the Charles Burns book, is a wild ride, half teen drama, half beautifully inked body horror. Now, this isn't exactly sort of existential, like, meaning of life horror, but it's this very visceral, amazing, like, body horror is the perfect way to express it. It took years for this book to come out. I finally read it a couple years ago in a collected edition, which you can get now. But it's some weird stuff happens to a bunch of teenagers. I think it's the late 70s, and it feels very much, it's a period piece, and it's one of those, like, the fear is partly in the lack of meaning.
Why is it the 60s and 70s scare us so much? It's so true, though. There's something about the 1960s and 70s. There's just a lot of horror that just sits so well there that doesn't want to travel forward.
For sort of scary and surreal imagery, along with Charles Burns, you can look at a lot of Dan Clowes stuff. His, like, a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron is full of sort of baffling, weird, violent imagery that alternates with sort of peaceful, thoughtful things. But it's got a lot, like, this is comics. You can have some crazy, unsettling images in your stories. So your Red Dog said House of Mystery I read the most, but I read a collection of creepy ones that got me. Susie Wetzel had said, I just started Fatale and Lock and Key. And I instantly fell in love with both.
I've got a couple of those
So we had a shout out for Fatale, which I gave a very brief sort of, it's the Brubaker and Phillips are fantastic at crime and mystery and mood and period pieces, and they use a lot of that along with their most, like, their only real, like, horror book is that Fatale, and I highly recommend it. It's self-contained. There's 5 paperbacks, or I don't know how many hardcovers it makes, but it's a limited run. And then this one, which I only read the beginning of. This is one of my big blind spots. It is one of the absolute runaway hit horror stories of the last 10 years.
I think so, yeah.
I can't actually see what we're looking at yet.
It's Lock and Key.
Oh, Lock and Key. Okay, you did put Lock and Key up there. Yes.
Art by Gabriel Rodriguez. It's Gabriel, right? Yeah. And written by a guy who, amazingly enough, like, has this book succeeded without a lot of people actually knowing who he was at first, which is funny because he's Joe Hill and Stephen King is his dad, and it turns out talent is genetic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, that helps.
We're ruined. I know.
Yeah, we're done. I don't remember I know I've read, like, this first trade and I got into the second one and I remember loving it, but I'm really bad when it comes to remembering.
Well, no, that's the trouble with so many things. Once you start getting so many things, so, like, it's like I was having that. Oh yeah, I remember. No, I don't remember. I mean, I saw Mushishi.
Yeah.
After a terrible tragedy, a family relocates to a mysterious old house. There's a lot of familiar elements to this story, but the doors in this house lead to a lot of strange and scary places and situations and ideas and conditions. And it went 6 volumes. I think there's sort of an epilogue one that just came out that will be added to that, maybe making it 7 officially. But was
Yeah,
just...
I'm refreshing my memory, and it's just like
we can just sit here and you can watch us read comic books.
Like how creeped out I was by
Would
this
you guys tune
book.
in if we just read comics for 2 hours? That's because we might do that. Mr. Nobody, Filthy O'Bedlam says, gives shout outs to current favorites.
Oh, and you even have the icon, Mr. Nobody. Thank you.
Black
One of my
Monday
favorites.
Murders, Clean Room, which is a Gail Simone book, also over at Vertigo, and Injection, which is Warren Ellis. So that's Jonathan Hickman, Gail Simone, Warren Ellis, and I'm so sorry, I try to make a point of always shouting out the artists of things, but I'm not sure off the top of my head. I remember who the artists are on these. I'm gonna get better at it. Injection, Clean Room, and Black Monday Murders, 3 very different. Black Monday Murders is like historical fiction horror. It's actually about this sort of like weird forces manipulating the fate of humanity circa the dawning of the Depression.
Wait, what is what?
The stock market crash.
Oh yeah, I just started reading that.
Like eternal forces that are manipulating and or behind it,
It's
and the like
so
sacrifices
creepy.
that they require of their servants. It's only a couple issues in. It's Jonathan Hickman doing his brilliance.
I just started picking it up. It's really good. It's got it, and the art is so stark.
It's Tom.
I know it's a brain.
Clean Room is by Gail Simone and an artist. I'm so sorry. I haven't had a chance to read this one yet, but it's about like sort of a self-help guru with where things get like people get in terribly bad situations, and apparently Astrid from Clean Room is according to the internet super horrifying. It just like a scary person. Gail Simone has a really twisted mind, and I love it. And she's apparently making really good use of it on the book Clean Room right now. Injection is the Warren Ellis' book, which I haven't read yet, but have heard is fantastic.
He's great.
No Love Countess shouts out Uzumaki by Junji Ito and more of his manga work. And okay, that's it. That's my thank you to everybody who sent those fantastic suggestions.
And if you're ever really bored, you can always just pick
also
a
have
random
Vertigo.
classic Vertigo book and go nuts. And
Yeah.
one of them that I was talking about earlier was Grant Morrison's Kid Eternity.
Yeah.
Because right now they've just rebooted Shade the Changing Man and Shade the Changing Girl, and that's great. And that makes me really happy. Kid Eternity was one of those books that I love that was just weird and messed up. The notion of the character, and I'll show a little art from this, this particular run was particularly dark and weird and filled with bloody weirdness. I mean, you can just pick every random page is just made of painted horror. Kid Eternity was a character who had the power to call anybody he wanted to help him do things, whether or not they were historical characters or real people or fictional people. It didn't matter. He could just say eternity and they would show up. So Superman could show up to show him, or Sigmund Freud could show up to help him, or George Washington, or any character, or Tom Sawyer. It didn't matter if they were real or not. They would just show up and they would help him until they died, and then he could never bring them back. So he could keep calling them, but if they died while helping him, then they were gone forever. And eventually they got into how and why that worked, and it was kind of a dark, evil layer of it was one of those things that seems cute and fun and happy, and then he starts to scratch the surface of very much like Sandman, that early wow, it's such a light and wonderful universe. I don't want to see the things that are holding it up because they must be really dark and awful, and it's really it's so good. It's so good.
I love our show.
I'm
gonna go read all of these tonight.
The only other thing I grabbed this just because we've been sort of ignoring there's a lot of big names in the sort of horror area.
Oh,
obviously,
that book.
Walking Dead is about
Never heard
surviving
of it.
and men's
never heard of
inhumanity to man as much as it is anything else. But I'm also going to give a little shout out to Echoes, which is a serial killer story that Joshua Fialkov, who's a buddy, did with Rasan Ekdal, which super creeped me out. Good job with that.
And I know we briefly touched on it,
touched, but if you want to give a better push.
Well,
for
I don't know
Hellboy.
that I can give much of a better push, but this was one of the first non-superhero comics that I ever read was Hellboy, and it was mostly because I loved Mignola's art. One of the first things I ever saw of Mignola was Triumph and Torment, the Doctor Strange story. I was like, this Mignola guy's gonna catch on someday, and then I was like, wait, he's doing Hellboy. What's this Hellboy book that I jumped in about probably 10 years after he'd started it. Never just hadn't even registered with me, but I fell in love with it mostly because if it has religion or a cult, I'm on board. Immediately on board.
And boy, does it have and Nazis.
Yeah,
boy,
but,
so many
this
Nazis.
artwork is just.
It's so.
I mean, how like is this like? Would you say it's like very minimalist? Like how would you like it's?
It's like the colors. The colors are very tonal. Like there's it's simple to look at. There's a lot going on.
You can follow the panels like super easy, like, and there's always something going on, and this works.
Never too busy.
Never too busy, and it works a lot with like very dark colors, which I always enjoy. It's very rich.
There's very solid inking. That is one of the
very solid
signature art things that goes with Mignola, and the people that he's chosen to add to that world. A lot of heavy blacks, very dynamic compositions. But like
noirish
you said,
almost,
not too busy. It's. But
like Hellboy like is discovered during World War II when Rasputin was he was working with the Nazis, right?
They were working with the Nazis.
I believe he was working with the Nazis.
They were working with the Nazis.
He's working with the Nazis to summon this great world-ending doom on behalf of the Nazis, and they bring this like tiny little Hellboy, this little bitty devil guy, and they're like, he's a child. The American soldiers come in, kill them all. One of the scientists takes him home and raises him as his own, and they form the Bureau of BPRD, Bureau of Research and Development.
Wow.
Around him, because then they discover there is this creature named Abe Sapien, who is human,
Fishy
but like
and
fish-like and hyper-intelligent, and he has to have a special breathing apparatus. They eventually also discover.
I just remember the evil Clockwork Nazi. The evil Clockwork Nazi is one of my favorite things. It's just like
so good. And then my favorite, I don't remember his name, but one of my favorite things ever in a comic book ever was the Ghost, who had to be in like a special suit.
Yes.
Like
the diving, like it was like the early version of the diving suit,
like an early diving bell kind of thing. And I was like, he's a ghost in a suit, and he can like escape from the suit and go do. I know they had it in the movie, but like in the comics, it's.
And speaking of that movie, this brings us right back around to a certain Guillermo del
Toro.
Hey, I've got a great story about Guillermo del Toro.
So one of the things about if you're interested in Hellboy, it's one of those books where I know people who that's the only books they read. Yeah. Where like there are people, if you're one of those people,
who like, I'm not comics people. Oh, but here's my library of Hellboy. Yeah.
It's one of those books that like if you're somebody who's only going to glam onto one thing, this might be the one thing you glam onto. Like this might become your deal. It's got a great vibe. And it's fun. It's pulpy. It's pulpy and fun.
While we're still on the subject of Hellboy, we got a question from Fickle Fandoms. What is strong inking and what is dynamic composition?
Okay, so...
Good question.
I love you for this question. Thank you for asking it.
So how the page is made is we start with somebody goes over in pencil and puts everything down in pencil to sort of put down where all the characters are going to be, how the camera's going to, the panel is going to relate to the viewer. All these things go down, and then someone goes down with a big black pen, and they start deciding what lines are going to be prominent.
Yeah, most traditional comics were made with it separate. Like, even now when people do a lot of things digitally, they'll still talk about penciling and inking because in some cases, or a lot of cases, you'll lay out sort of your sketched out version, you'll firm up some of those details, and then you'll select which of them you're going to put your black line over. And it's what we sort of recognize as the comic book style.
And they used to be two separate jobs. Mm-hmm. And often still are, and the inker, a penciler and inker have an interesting relationship. And different inkers, there's a lot of people online who have done things where they've taken pencil art from classic artists and given it to 10 different inkers to see what they do with it, and it's
different,
dramatic changes depending on what kind of lines they use and how heavy they are.
Depending how deep you get into comics, you get like there are controversial inkers. Because there was a guy who was very famously the guy you went to if you did not have a lot of time, and he once covered a character's head with a beach ball on a cover because he just did not have time to finish inking it. And his name was Vince Coletta, and he did a lot of good work, but he was also, I think they made a book on him called The Thin Black Line, which was it's all about Vince Coletta and his complicated history as an inker, where it's not that dude's fault if you had 35 seconds to get something inked and
you got it done.
But he literally put a beach ball in someone's head once.
Do you want,
in front of some figures at it.
Do you want it right or do you want it Wednesday? He was I want it Wednesday. Done. All right. But you can see some heavy black line. Well, you can see that there are whole panels that are nothing but ink, where they've just taken squares and filled them with black ink. And there's no color gradients. All the colors are very, very stark in themselves. And so The panels themselves, by dynamic, we mean that the actions are very heavy. The characters are.
It's funny because
there's not a lot of background. It's just a stark color. They just sort of give you exactly what you need to see and nothing else.
These things, it's interesting. This is actually a pretty thin one, but like it applies to the overall style because they're using a very clear line. Where
we can go like all of it. There's so many other things.
Examples here.
I was about to say Sandman is made.
Sandman is again heavy inks.
There.
The blacks are very, very clear. You get painterly styles where they minimize this effect, but it's very good, especially for horror books. There's a reason I'm finding a lot of heavy blacks
on today's pull. But like that's a painted style. That doesn't have any inking at all.
Painted style, so a departure from that.
Or if we pull up a Harrow County, there's like
I was about to say.
Harrow County's, while it's a thick black line, it's not heavily inked. Like you can see where they like leave a more animated vibe, where you just have a line differentiating the character from the background, and everything else is just sort of brushed in.
And I will shout out composition-wise, something that you'll notice I opened to a random page of Hellboy. And found like the action in this panel is very clear. There's movement from one side to the other. Your eye moves in a certain way when you see a panel like this. It travels down in this direction and focuses in here, and it's sort of... He's a very gifted artist in terms of composing a page and guiding your eye and making sure that there's a lot of visual interest. And that's sort of...
But also, like, another part of composition is making sure that the proper amount of visual information is in there. That was, like, one of the things that made Kirby so good at composition was he could squeeze...
So
many characters into one panel, give them all like a different plane of existence and all doing like various motions and all of them very like determined. Like you could see it.
We're going to do at some point in the near future, this is actually one of the shows that I'm developing right now really strongly, is a how to read comics episode of the Wednesday Club where we're going to actually talk about, just because I tried to get my mom to read comics all the time when I was young, and she was like, she was definitely into it, but it was like there were questions that she needed answered that I didn't know how to answer correctly yet.
See, this one has Harrow County also uses pretty strong inks.
It's hard.
I think they alternate back and forth depending on the needs of that particular story beat, you know? So
I know that we have to...
We need to start wrapping
up.
We need
to start wrapping up because we're running out of time.
Yeah. Let me throw out, Paper Girls actually gave me nightmares last week. I hadn't had a book do that since Sphere in middle school. That came from...
Nice.
Half Faring Circus.
The Brian K. Vaughan, Cliff Chang book Paper Girls is going on right now, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Great way to deal with Stranger Things.
Alan Moore, Neonomicon, and Grant Morrison, Nameless, are both essential, scary, existential horror. Thank you, Cable the Raven. I've actually been meaning to get into the Nameless, so maybe you just convinced me to do that. You're my Wednesday club, Cable. And Fickle Fandoms once more says, answer to your question, if you do the How to Read a Comic Book episode, it can double as your excuse to just sit there and read comics for the entire episode.
Like this.
Yeah. Oh, read the comics like this.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you.
So
I have guests I want to do for our How to Read. I actually have some friends who like don't read comics. I want to bring them on so that we have like somebody to ask all the questions we forget.
Oh.
Yeah. And Yaml, I love you. They say, I see Game of Thrones similar to the Venture Brothers. It's a story about failure. What happens after the rebel knight marries a damsel in distress. If you will make a Venture Brothers reference, I will love you forever.
You will. It's
so
true.
It's the greatest
story
ever told. So I'm sorry. We should tell people about our show
next week. Yeah, we're out of time. Next week, I think, are we officially delving into DC next week? Is that the vibe? We haven't talked a lot about DC and why it's exciting what they're doing now.
Technically we've been talking nonstop about Vertigo. But regular like, DC.
Why it's been kind of hard on the internet to talk about DC and why a lot of us have been like drifted away and why we're coming back. And what makes DC great versus Marvel. And I think it's time to talk about what makes DC great. Yeah. And I'm delving.
And by the way, I don't think we're saying that either one is better than the other, but they both have their strong suits, and we're gonna explore that.
It is the borscht of superheroes. It's a cold beet soup with sour cream, and damn, I love it.
So DC likes to reinvent itself every couple of years or so. So we're going to go through a bit of that history and look at where things are right now. And I believe we have confirmed, so we will have a guest next week.
We will have a guest.
The amazing Ashley Victoria Robinson is going to come join us. Who we were hoping to have
as confirmed
week,
as we can get 1 week. Yeah.
Yeah. we should have her here to talk some DC Comics with us and look at some crises and some rebirth.
Mm-hmm. Like 53 of them, 52 of them.
Thank you all so much for your suggestions this week.
You guys are amazing. We love doing our
Final note, I just found out that Wrightson his just hands were everywhere. Did you see the little anecdote that Joss Whedon had?
No.
Where he saw some concept art come in for the Reavers when he was making either Firefly or Serenity.
Serenity,
and he looked at a piece of concept art and he went, "Wow, this guy really loves Bernie Wrightson."
It was Bernie Wrightson.
It was Bernie Wrightson.
What?
Thank
that's
you.
amazing.
There's no limit to what we owe you. Thank you for expanding the landscape of comics, for staking out such wonderful territory for art, and for the most human, inhuman creatures in the history of comics. Thank you for everything you did, Bernie Wrightson. Thanks for watching the Wednesday Club.
Perfectly said.
We'll be back next week.
On Wednesday?
Probably Wednesday.
Probably Wednesday.
Yeah.
Let's say Wednesday.
See you next week on the Wednesday Club. I'm Amy, this is Taliesin, that's Matt. We never said that this week.
Find us on the internet.